Here at last, they felt was the motive for the crime. But they were not satisfied with his explanation of why he had gone to the house that afternoon. "You carried no money today?" "No. None whatever." "Then why did they send for you?" "I've told you that Mr. Lancaster wanted the chest opened and investigated." "A sort of audit, I suppose." "Why an audit? Did Margaret Lancaster explain?" "No, I haven't an idea." None of them had liked the hoarding. "I hoped it meant the stuff was to go back to the bank." "It was a fool idea from the start." "This key the family was searching for, was that the key to this chest?" "I don't know what they were searching for," he said rather sulkily. "My aunt wore the key to the chest on a chain around her neck." "You know how much gold was in this chest?" "Is it your idea that robbery was the motive for the crime?" "I have no ideas about it at all." "More than half the stuff was in gold, the rest in currency." "I'd say nobody could carry the gold away in a hurry." "It's pretty heavy." As to the currency, he looked at them. "Why in God's name don't you look and see?" But this, as it happened, was not possible that night. On the first information from Jim that the chest had held a fortune in gold and currency, Inspector Briggs had been notified and the chest examined. Not only did it show no signs of having been tampered with, but it was still so heavy that the mere act of getting it out from under the bed was a difficult one. No key had been found, and the officers stood about the chest, eyeing it. It was almost midnight by that time, but Sullivan went downstairs and after getting an ice pick from the back porch, the only tool he could find, was on his way back when he met Mr. Lancaster in the lower hall. "I'm glad you're here, Mr. Lancaster," he said. "We want to take a look into the chest under the bed upstairs." "I suppose you have no other key to it?" The old man eyed him stonily. "The chest is not to be opened," he said. "But if there has been a robbery—" "There has been no robbery. The chest contains a large part of my wife's estate, and will not be opened unless her attorney is present, perhaps not until her will has been probated." "I know very little about such matters." Sullivan, I believe, went up the stairs, swearing softly. There was apparently nothing to be done, since the chest itself showed no signs of having been disturbed. He and the inspector agreed to let it ride until morning, and it was only the discovery of fingerprints on it that changed their minds. These checked with none belonging to the household, all of whom had been printed that evening, and were quite distinct, That is, 2 hands had been laid on the lid, on either side of the lock, as if to raise it. They made no further attempt to open the box that night, but they put a policeman in the room on guard over it, and at last, after a rather acid exchange with that office in the city hall, they went home, the inspector to take his bromide and Sullivan to ponder over those prints on the box. For they were the prints of a small hand, and Jim Wellington was built on large and fairly substantial lines. That, as nearly as I can describe it, was the situation that night of Thursday, August the 18th, following the murder. The police had gone over every inch of the house and were still examining the grounds outside, but what they had as a result of 7 hours or more intensive labor was the body of an aged and bedridden woman, almost decapitated by the blows of an axe, the picture of a family, stunned but still bearing with dignity its terrible catastrophe, and for clues a blood-stained axe, 2 or 3 blades of grass, a smear outside a window screen, a locked chest with some unidentified prints on it, and the knowledge for what it was worth that both Mr. Lancaster and Jim Wellington had been in the house at or about the time the murder was committed. I myself was faint and confused when I got back from Jim's that night. Mother was asleep, locked in and probably with a vase set on each of her window sills so it would fall if anyone tried to enter by the porch roof. Holmes was snoring lustily in the guest room, and the night air was heavy and close, as though rain were in prospect. I remember standing in the center of my room and looking about me. My sense of security was badly shaken that night, and suddenly I realized that I had given up everything else for it, had sacrificed to it my chance to live and even my chance to love. And for what? That my bed should be neatly turned down at night and the house run smoothly, with fresh flowers in the proper season and the table napkins ironed first on the wrong side and then polished on the right? Perhaps I was hysterical that night, for I found myself looking at the fat pincushion on my bureau and laughing. I had done that only once before. That was when I came home from boarding school for the last time, and tried to throw it out. I had done it, too, but the next day it was firmly in its place again. I had laughed then, and then burst into a storm of tears. After that the pincushion was always symbolic to me. It stood for everything, for no children to play with when I was small, for long hair when I had wanted to cut mine, for fried chicken and ice cream at hot Sunday midday dinners, for the loss of romance and the general emptiness of life. And that night it squatted there as if to remind me that life was short, but that it was still there, that it would always be there. I did not undress at once.